Hello, beautiful souls. I hope you're well. Today, I will see what the guidance wishes to share with you. I will center and be back. We wish to invite you to integration and integrate as much as you can rather than try to distance yourself from certain things, and especially from parts of yourself that you might not necessarily be at peace with. We mean by this that we all have parts of us that have done things that are not necessarily, in our view, in the most benevolent or the most high vibrational. And sometimes it's very important to be able to accept what we have done, and to integrate this in everything as a member of who, of a facet of the crystal or the diamond that we all are. And this includes obviously what we would call our shadow or shadow parts. We have often, and especially in the spiritual community, there's this tendency and desire to always look like a happy, joyful, loving person and never be on the low vibration type of energies. And that is not necessarily healthy because we have all types of emotions going through us. Sometimes it can be anger. Sometimes we can feel sadness. We can feel emotions that are not necessarily considered positive or pleasant, at least. And there's no such thing as negative emotions. And being angry and being sad or being, everything that you can think of. It could be jealous or anything. Those emotions exist and they have a purpose, and they are here to give us the opportunity to experience different aspects of our lives and different aspects and facets of ourselves, obviously. And they're here to provoke lessons in our lives. So that's quite it's quite an important thing to be able to face each of our emotions, to own them, to live them, to go through them, and eventually, at some point when you have dealt with them, you're able to transmute them and finally eventually let them go. But escaping or from them is definitely not going to serve us in any way. But one element that the guidance really wanted to insist upon is perhaps those shadowy parts of ourselves that come with our past life. For example, more and more people right now in this transitional phase of our planet, more and more people are discovering and recovering and remembering information about their past lives, about their, we say past, but truly it's parallel lives, because there's no such linear time really in reality, except on this planet, but in this realm, this 3D realm, but it's quite an illusion in a way. And so we've been through many, many, many experiences, and we've played many roles. We've played the role of the victim, the role of the savior, but also the role of the aggressor, or call it the way you want, and the more aggressive role if we want. And we've all had that. And anybody claiming that they're living on Terra and that they've never had either an experience where they played the bad role or had a previous life where they were bad or acting in a negative way. Anybody who doesn't want to face that or claims not to have had any of that, I'd be worried. I'd really be worried about their intentions and agenda. I think all of us in humility have to realize that we've been playing these roles, these sometimes more nefarious roles. And so, in our lives, in our past lives, for example, we might realize that we've done really horrific things. For example, I remember being a female secretary in the high command of the Nazi party, Nazi commandment, if you want. I was there in the bunker. Have you seen the movie? I don't know if you've seen the movie The Fall, which tells the story of Hitler and the closest officers and these secretaries and things. I don't know if I was a secretary for in this particular what's the word particular bunker itself or this particular high command, but I know I was highly placed in the Nazi hierarchy in terms of working for high commandment. And I had a life where in that life I remember being kind of stalked, or I would say a Nazi officer, which was a kind of high ranked, obviously, for whom I don't know if he was my boss or if he was just part of the high commandment there, for one of the people I worked with or for. But he was a redheaded guy, and he was acting in a very I would say in a reptilian way. That's no other way to describe it. Very narcissistic, very manipulative, very probably abusive. I don't know if it was sexual or physical or anything like that, but definitely psychological manipulation and playing, horrible mind games with me. And I know I was a female in those days. Women were not really allowed to speak their mind. And this officer was really, really aggressing me. He was really kind of stalking me. And I remember that one day we were in the bunker in what sounded like a sort of parking or something, a place where the cars were parked. And he came up to me, and his intentions were really negative, and I felt it. And knowing this guy's intentions, I stayed with a weapon all the time with me. I always had a knife with me hidden in I don't know, in my clothing or something. And I remember that at one point in this parking lot, he came up to me in a very kind of aggressive way. So I don't know if he was trying to rape me or to attack me or just whatever. I don't remember the exact things. I remember this from a past life regression. And I took the knife and I cut his throat. Yes, right there in the parking lot. And I just ran away, and I left him bleeding to death in that parking lot. So, what a lovely life, right? I mean, not like being part of, Nazi high commandment was not bad enough in terms of, being kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time. Having actually cut a man's throat, even though he was an asshole and he was an aggressive, manipulative, narcissistic reptilian man in some way, there was no reason to actually take a life, but still. And I kind of had to pay that karmic debt in a later life, and one day perhaps I'll tell you about that. But that's I just wanted to give you that example. But I have also visions or memories which are less precise, but of being a Jew, being chased with my family in a obviously Nazi Second World War context, where I was hiding in not cupboards, but what's the word, in pantries and things like that. And I was always in that cortisol, intense stress of being found out and always hiding. And when I was a child, I always had these dreams about being pursued by people with uniforms and me hiding, and and it doesn't come from necessarily from a transgenerational thing, because I'm not Jewish. My family is not of Jewish background, so it's not like I have memories, for example, where I could have had a grandfather or grandmother tell me about this, and then it would have kind of worked in my mind. It's not like I don't think I've heard about these stories when I was a child, so I don't know why I was dreaming about these things when I was a child, and definitely later in adult life, even though if I've finally heard about what happened in the camps and what happened to the Jewish people during the Second World War, I had I had kind of these very, very vivid memories of hiding in places, probably against what seemed to be kind of Nazi officers. So it's kind of interesting because, again, not only it shows how you can play all the roles. You can be the savior, you can be the victim, you can be the aggressor. um and I considered a life, where I was actually in the Nazi command, in a way, by working for them, that I was in a negative, kind of negative position, because even though perhaps I had not, well, I think that indirectly, just working for these people, I was responsible for the death of many millions of people. So even though if I didn't put them personally in the gas chambers and in the camps, in some ways, when you write this material as a secretary, you are contributing and collaborating. So I guess I would have to own myself as being Nazi in a way, and in that past life, in that parallel life. So that's something, and on top of it, I just, cut someone else's throat, which was not exactly the most benevolent and thoughtful thing you can do to another human being. So the reason why I'm telling you all this is just to show you that we're so complex, as multidimensional beings. We're so complex, and we've been so many things in so many lives. There's been so many wars, not just on Terra, but also on, other planes of existence, and, other galaxies, other star systems and things, that we've been so many things. We've played all the possible roles, the positive, the negative. And so the reason why I'm telling you this is because I want you to always remind yourself that you're all of this, that you are part of, you have all these facets within you. And as the more and more that you recover the information you have from your previous lives, from previous memories, you might be very, very what's the word, you can be triggered by these memories and feel, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. Was I really someone who killed 100 million people? Was I responsible for the death of X and Y? What a horror. Did I torture people in the previous life? These things can happen. And you have to remember that, as tough as this is to deal with this information, it's also important to own it and to accept it, and to realize that the reason why perhaps today you're at a point in your life where you're capable of having empathy and compassion, and you're able to also take decisions in sovereignty, not to follow certain governments' policies, or certain things that are asked of you by the government, because you remember these experiences. You remember that, for example, like I said in this example, by remembering that I was part of the Nazi high command at some point in the previous life, I know that, for example, when everything happened in the last pandemics and everything, and I could see how all of this was manipulation from the deep state, and how all of this was about us complying, and it was, again, another a system failure, in a way, where we were being imposed certain actions, which were not only hurting our sovereignty, but endangering millions of people, like the vaccine did. It is in those times that your psyche and your soul remembers. And your soul has said, after, for example, the Nazi experience, I will never again participate in such a thing. I will never be an actor in such a movement. Never. And I know that me, when the pandemics arrived, my first instinct was, I will not comply with this. I will not comply with this, because this reminded me immediately, that reminded me of the Nazi again. And I was like, I'm not going to go there again. I will not go there. So again, we have to remember that all these experiences are absolutely crucial, not only for us to develop our sovereignty and to know what we don't want anymore and what we will not accept when there is things that are happening in our governments, in our world, but also it gives us the compassion and empathy to understand what certain people go through when they've been through repressive systems, through through pain, through suffering, through losing people they love through war, or to sickness or anything like that. All of these are life lessons. They're absolutely crucial. So the whole purpose of this little transmission is to invite us to always be inclusive of all the facets of ourselves. So not only the past lives where we might have been real assholes, or but also in the present when we've been real assholes, because this happens sometimes we can say things we regret, sometimes we can act in ways that are not necessarily in people's best interest, or are not necessarily quite respectful. We can act in very kind of not so kind ways. And it's really super important to own ourselves in this, and to accept that some part of us might be reacting in that way. And even though we don't necessarily do it on purpose, often it's due to either ignorance or lack of presence or consciousness. But we have to, first of all, forgive ourselves, not only for these things in our present, but also from the past, in order to liberate these past experiences after having gone through the transmutation of these traumas from these past lives. But we have to forgive ourselves and forgive others, obviously, for experiences that might have hurted us very much, and others as well. Because if we don't, we're always going to get kind of triggered by that, and we're always going to repeat the same type of patterns, and putting everything under the carpet because you don't want to look like a bad person, or you don't want other people to think that you're a bad person, or that you've been a bad person, is not helping you at all. Having to face it, in owning it in sovereignty, and saying, okay, I've been that, I am that, and I am capable of that. What we call monsters, we can be monsters at some points, and it's okay. Well, it's okay. It's not necessarily okay, but I mean is that it's okay to have been through that, because it will give you the opportunity to not do that again in next time. So it's absolutely crucial to really own and really be at peace again with the darker and more shadowy part of ourselves, either in the present life or from previous lives. So I think that's what I wanted to share with us today, to be the perfect multi-dimensional, but also multifaceted diamond that we are. And often the shadows will also permit our light to create a beautiful contrast, and those contrasts are important. I personally, even though I'm trying most of the time to be as much high vibration as can be, and joyful and loving and everything, that doesn't mean I don't have a dark part in me. Far from it. And but I own it. I know what it is. I know what I've done in the past. I know what I do sometimes, and I do go back to kind of either not forgive, but forgive myself, but also to say I'm sorry, and be able to say, if I hurt someone, to be able to say I'm sorry, but not hide it under the carpet. Facing it, owning it, super important to be in balance in our lives. All right, I just felt like sharing that with you for today. Have a lovely day, and integrate every light and a dark part of yourself, because you're going to realize how rich and complex and deep and wise in the end this makes you as a soul. All right, have a beautiful day. Take great care of yourself. All my gratitude for helping this channel bring positive vibes to more people.